This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. Today we're talking about table work. Table work is one of the things in Alexander Technique that gets us the most confused in other people's minds with body work. I'm putting that in quotes because in my mind, I am not a body worker that would require me to work on bodies, but that's not what I do. I teach skills. If I'm working with someone who's not on board, who isn't learning, they're not going to get improvement. I'm not working with just the body. I'm working with the person, mainly the mind. Table work is one of the interesting ways in which it can be, from the outside, visually, it looks very physical, as far as this is a physical activity, physical thing that we're doing. But it's a very mentally active process. So today I want to just give a little rundown of what that is, why you might see this, and what to expect from it if you take an Alexander lesson and they say, hey, would you like to do table work? There are many teachers who might put in like 5 or 10 minutes of table work in the context of a lesson. There are others who will say, I would want to do table work as like a one whole lesson and not mix it with other things because they would want the student to spend more time on the table. It really depends on the teacher. In general, table work is about de-escalation and learning to do less. You can't know how much less you can actually do in your muscles while movement is happening until you actually have the sensory experience of not engaging your muscles while movement is happening. How do we do that? With a teacher doing the movement for you, which is why you need to be laying down during it. So some of the things we might work with table work, which is what I'm sitting on now, is the table that we use for this in here. I might do something like lift someone's head for them as they're laying down on their back. And I'll say, okay, your job is to not help me. Your job is to not help me to lift your head. And I'll actually reach down and lift their head up for them, just a little bit. We're not pushing extreme ranges of motion at all. But what is it even like to allow movement to happen without your muscles being the ones to do it in your habitual way? So what that really does is it allows kind of the bottom end, the bottom range of possibility to open up as far as what is bare minimum? What is actually the lowest possible level of muscle engagement while movement is happening? That's something that's pretty hard to get when you're standing up and you're working against gravity, and you're also doing movements that are habitual, and you're going to activate your muscles in your habitual way. So some of the things that you might see as far as movement on the teacher's side is something like standing behind the head back here. Now, these are National Geographic magazines. That's what we tend to use in this studio. And I learned this from my teacher as well, since we share this studio. National Geographic magazines are pretty great to have under a student's head when they're doing table work, because that lets us have a lot of fine adjustment in how high the books are under their head. You will find different philosophies on how high of a book height people want. What I tend to go for is I want it to be about the same height as it would be if you were upright in gravity. Where's neutral for you? I want that same level of distance behind the head. So for most people, it's only about that much. For really tall folks, we might get maybe that many books. For me, I'm 5'5". I have about this much. But it's adjustable. There's no one correct way to do it. There's no one correct number of magazines that should be under your head for your height. So I might do something like stand back here. So the student is lying down with their head on the books, and I might lift up their head for them. And I might tilt it from side to side, and then set it back down. And all of this is with a lot of communication so that they always know what I'm doing. There are no surprises or shocks in here. These grippy pads here on the table are kitchen cabinet liners. They're just a little bit squishy and they have some grip to them. This is so that when students' legs are bent, so the knees are up, the feet are on these, that helps the feet not slide on the blanket. If they're wearing socks, some socks are really slippery and people's feet might slide out. So that's all these are for. I also might do something like lifting the arm. So taking the arm out, I will usually have my hand in something like a handshake grip with the student's hand and the other hand under their elbow. and then we just walk out a little bit. We might do some rotational movements along with that. And what I do is I feel in my hands, where is there resistance? Where is this structure not wanting to move freely? And then based on what I feel in my hands, I'll give a student cues for, here's some directions for you to think that can help prevent that. A really common one with arms, with that taking out the arm movement that I was just showing there, comes from pulling below the shoulder blade. So if I'm feeling resistance coming from there in my hands, I might say to a student, I would like you to think about allowing distance from the lower middle of your back up diagonally to that shoulder that I'm working with. And frequently, that actually helps quite a bit because they're letting go of a pull and a resistance, which is just a muscle engagement that they didn't know they were still doing. This is where it starts to get really individual though, because of course there are a million different places that there could be resistance. There are a million different places there could be a pull. And that's where you get into the teacher's training and the skill of the teacher to have a really good pair of hands and to be able to then mentally analyze, what did that feel like? Where was this? And how can I give verbal directions to enable the student to change this pattern that's going on? We do similar things with the legs. So again, if they're lying on their backs, the knees are bent, so the knees are up towards the ceiling. I might do something like pick up the leg for them and let them really experience what is it like to have movement from the hip joint without them actually controlling it, and help to let that go and put the leg all the way down, and then to be long on the whole table to allow that distance to be there. I feel like I'm sitting on my student now that I've been demonstrating with an imaginary body. So those are the kind of things that you might see with table work. There is a good bit of variation among different teachers as far as how they like to do it, their own preferences, instructions that they might give a student while they're doing that. In general, my lessons tend to be only 30 minutes long, and that tends to come from, that's just what the university lesson length is where it's like my university students, when they're taking lessons for credit, it's 30 minutes once a week, and that's what we can get. For my private practice students, you can certainly do longer lessons, and then I would mix it up and probably do a combination of table and other things. But frequently, simply from a cost perspective, a lot of people want to stick to the shorter lessons just because those don't cost as much. So, what I would encourage you to try out, even though you can't do the level of getting your arms or legs or head to move without you doing it in the same way that you would with an Alexander teacher actually doing table work with you, you can still use a really key principle here. Give yourself a 5-minute lie down during the day. If you can't find 5 minutes, give 30 seconds. Lie down on a fairly solid surface. This is not a couch or a mattress. Put something under your head. Aim for round about something that thick-ish to start with, and then adjust as you see fit. Have your knees bent so that you're lying back on the floor or table like that. And ask for doing less. We call this an active rest or a constructive rest because it's mentally active and you're doing constructive things, but your body is at rest. Finding that time to let yourself decompress, to let your spine leave this vertical gravity arrangement for a while can be really helpful to people. And I would encourage you to give it a try. See what you think. Coming back to this idea always of, can I do less in a way that's helpful for me?